The city lights of New York shimmered like spilled diamonds against the velvet darkness. But for Amara Johnson, the glittering skyline had begun to feel like nothing more than an endless reminder of how small she was. At 28, she had built a life with steady hands and a hopeful heart, pouring herself into her career as an interior designer, and most of all, into her relationship with Michael Carter. Michael's name had once been synonymous with everything she thought love should be. He was charming in that cinematic way that made strangers turn their heads when he entered a room, tall, broad-shouldered, with a smile that promised intimacy, even when it was aimed at the world. From the first moment she met him, she had believed he was the kind of man who could carry her through every storm. And for 4 long years, she clung to that belief like it was oxygen. Amara had given him the best parts of herself. She stayed up late sketching designs for his growing consultancy firm, offered every ounce of her patience when his ambition pulled him away, and silenced the gnawing doubts that whispered when he canceled dates or forgot anniversaries. Love, she told herself, required forgiveness. It required understanding. And she loved him. Oh, how she loved him. That night, the night her world split open, had begun like a scene from the life she once imagined. She had left her office early, her heart bubbling with anticipation as she carried a small box of pastries and a bottle of wine. 4 years together, 4 years of memories. She wanted to surprise and remind him that even in the chaos of New York, their love was worth celebrating. The key slid smoothly into the lock of their shared apartment, and she stepped inside with a smile already tugging at her lips. But before she could announce herself, the muffled laughter drifted down the hallway. A woman's laughter. High-pitched, intimate, the kind of laughter that belonged not to friendship, but to the soft, dangerous world of secrets. Her body stiffened, every muscle straining. She set the pastries on the counter, her fingers trembling as she followed the sound. The bedroom door, once a sanctuary, stood ajar, and within it, framed in the golden lamplight, was Michael. Her Michael pressed against another woman, their lips devouring one another, his hands roaming with a hunger that had once been reserved for her. The air rushed from Amara's lungs. The world blurred. She wanted to scream, to collapse, to erase the sight from her eyes. But she stood frozen, the betrayal searing itself into her bones. "Michael," she whispered, her voice breaking. He turned, startled, his lips glistening with the evidence of disloyalty. For a fleeting second, guilt flashed across his face. But then it hardened into something colder, sharper. "Amara," he said flatly, as though her presence were the intrusion, not his infidelity. The other woman scrambled to cover herself. Cheeks flushed, but Michael didn't falter. He didn't beg. He didn't stammer an apology. Instead, he pulled his shirt back over his shoulders and met Amara's wide, devastated eyes with a calmness that chilled her blood. "You shouldn't have come home early," he muttered. Her lips parted, disbelief flooding her. How could you? After everything after us?" Michael sighed as if her heartbreak was an inconvenience. "You're too good, Amara. Too soft. Too safe. I need more. I need someone who pushes me forward, someone who matches my hunger. You've always been content just existing." The words cut deeper than the betrayal itself. Every moment she had sacrificed for him, every time she had stayed silent instead of demanding more, every ounce of trust she had poured into him, it was all dismissed in a single cruel breath. Her knees buckled, but pride held her upright. She would not collapse before him. Not here, not now. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest as though she could hold her breaking heart together, and whispered, "You don't get to define me, not anymore." Then she turned and walked out, each step heavier than the last, but each one carrying her further away from the wreckage of the life she thought she wanted. Outside, the city roared with indifference. Cars honked, neon signs flickered, and couples laughed on the sidewalk. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, the cool night air slicing through her thin blouse. But no chill could compare to the frost in her soul. She wandered, her heels clattering against the pavement, until she found herself standing at the edge of the Hudson River. The water churned black and endless, swallowing the city lights. She stared at her fragmented, rippling reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back. For hours, she stood there replaying every memory, every smile, every whispered promise that now felt like poison. Tears streaked her cheeks, but she made a vow when dawn began to spill across the horizon, painting the sky in pale gold. She would not let Michael's betrayal be the final chapter of her story. Seattle did not greet Amara with fireworks or fanfare. It exhaled a gray, glimmering breath that softened edges and polished streets to a sheen. The plane sank through the clouds, and she watched the water stitch itself into the sky. Relief arrived like a small animal hiding under her ribs, and finally dared to step out. Her studio on Capitol Hill was modest, scuffed floorboards, tall windows, and a gurgling radiator. The landlord wore her keys on a ribbon and said, "The light here forgives." Amara unpacked slowly, placing pencils by the window, stacking sketchbooks on a scratched desk, setting a lemon in a bowl, so the yellow could turn the room into a quiet promise. When the kettle hissed, she made tea and let the steam kiss her face. Silence waited, without asking questions. Lila knocked to a rhythm you could dance to. "Welcome to your soft reset," she announced, dropping her raincoat. They built a bookshelf, debated shelving by color or mood, and fell laughing onto the rug. Lila tucked a tulip behind Amara's ear. "You are not a ruin," she said. "You are a renovation." In the morning light seeped through the city's damp curtain. Amara walked to her new job above a bakery where cinnamon rose like a welcome. Nora, the director, shook her hand. "We make ordinary spaces remember their purpose. Start with this community arts center. It has a heart, but no bones." The building sagged like a tired friend. Dust swam in window light, turning air to galaxies. Amara measured, sketched, ran her fingertips over a cracked sill, and imagined it sanded to an invitation. Her notes looked like prayer disguised as plans restore light. Pegboard for adaptable storage. Second-hand tables sanded until they forgot old lives. At lunch, she ate a warm croissant on the sill and thought beauty should be helpful, something you can lean on when your spine shakes. A bell chimed like a pearl that afternoon, leading her into Sweet Haven vanilla orange peel low jazz. A woman with silver hair smiled. "First time?" "Yes," Amara said, "and I'll have a second. I'm Rose. Sit where the light forgives. I'll bring you something that you believe in." Amara chose a window table where Rain wrote a delicate script. Rose brought chamomile with citrus and almond cake that tasted like kindness. She offered only good questions, quiet or company poetry or gossip, and the answers felt like doorways, days unspooled with purpose. Amara ran along Lake Union in the mornings, beneath skies that changed outfits by the hour. Workdays, she drafted plans with rosemary, scenting her fingers. Evenings, she returned to Sweet Haven, where Rose polished the counter in patient circles and let sentences arrive in their own time. On Fridays, Lila dragged her to salsa. They misstepped, laughed, and kept moving, even when the beat surprised them. Grief did not vanish. It softened and arrived as weather rather than catastrophe mist that asked to be noticed. Amara let it pass through and learned that breathing could be a decision. Volunteers came to the arts center as if summoned by primer retirees, teenagers with paint in their hair, a tattooed bookseller named Jules. They sanded walls together, speaking the grammar of effort: scrape, wipe, breathe, repeat. A quiet boy asked, "Why a pegboard?" "Because walls should adapt," she said. You never know when someone's idea needs a different hook. He nodded as if she'd offered permission. At home, she practiced adaptation. She cooked low, slow garlic until it grew sweet. Spinach surrendered to silk. She turned her phone face down and sometimes off. She wrote letters to days instead of people. Dear Tuesday, I wore red lipstick for no one, which looked like bravery. Neighbors became choreography. Mr. Whitaker watered tomatoes like prayer. Across the hall, Aisha slid recipes and compliments under the door. You wore yellow today. It loved you. The marine biologists upstairs argued tenderly about plankton. Community arrived in increments, a borrowed drill, a held elevator, a shared umbrella that knew the height of her shoulder. On a Saturday that decided to be blue, Lila kidnapped Amara for impractical beauty. Pike Place exploded with flowers. A cellist played grief in its good suit. Amara bought 2 hand-thrown mugs with soft human rims. She could not say why she chose 2. Lila only squeezed her hand. That night, rain rehearsed at the windows. Amara opened her sketchbook to a blank page and drew a room with curved walls like the inside of a shell, a bench built into the sill books stacked like friends. Without meaning to, she added a second cup of tea. When she noticed it, she smiled, not a plea, but a readiness. The Art Center woke by degrees. Rose donated cookies with a note. For courage, love, with good posture. Lila wrangled volunteers into bouquets. Amara lettered a sign, welcome to the studio. Make something that matters to you. We'll call it beautiful. People came as if the city had been waiting. A grandmother with 3 grandsons entered like weather. A teenager with blue hair drew faces that looked like every feeling she'd ever had. A man in a suit hovered until Amara asked him to carry a box. He stayed to glue cardboard turrets with 7-year-olds and left with paint on his cuff. Gratitude rose so swiftly, it cleared space beneath her ribs like a skylight she hadn't planned, but now could not imagine living without. Setbacks tested her scaffolding. The easels went missing. Paint arrived in shades named fog and dusk, making the room a handsome bruise. A pipe burst and soaked sketchbooks. She laughed, made hot chocolate, and declared a college day. The ruined pages became constellations. Disaster shrugged and turned to texture. One afternoon, walking home by a different street, she heard a child's laughter ring like a bell in a glass-walled lobby. The sound touched something asleep inside her. She didn't turn to look. Some sweetness can be received without pursuit. The pebble Rose had given her in her pocket for luck. For reminding your hand, it knows gentleness warmed in her palm. That evening, she cooked lemon pasta, ate by the window, and cleaned the sink until it shone. Domestic order did not save a life, but it made music of it. She taped a list to the wall. Things I believe. 1. Rain is not always sadness. Sometimes it is the sky touching everything at once. 2. Rooms can teach you to breathe again. 3. Friends are scaffolding for new wings. 4. Solitude is a place, not a punishment. 5. Wanting is allowed before the future is clear. She slept through the night for the first time in a long while. Morning opened like silk. She bought a French press. The first sip tasted dark as soil and bright as citrus. A dog shook rain from its fur down the street and looked pleased with the mess. The world felt unafraid of her, and she of it. At work, Nora slid a folder across the desk. A bookstore wants a renovation, she said. Narrow street, brave heart. The margins asked for more light warmth and a nook for children. Amara walked there between raindrops. The bell chimed a cousin to Sweet Havens. The air smelled of paper and dust, vanilla and ambition. The owner was Jules, and peonies bloomed in ink along her arms. She said, I want it to feel like a story chooses you shy. That's what good rooms do. Amara replied. They choose you back. They talked about sightlines, dwell zones, and the choreography of curiosity. Amara suggested lighter shelves, a banquette beneath the stairs, a rail for face-out covers that would sing to passing eyes. Jules listened like someone hearing her shop confess its dreams. When Amara left, Jules pressed a paperback into her hand. For bravery, she said. On the bus, Amara opened it to a line that ached. You do not have to be new to begin again. You only have to be willing. Rose slid a saucer beneath a cup that evening and observed, You're walking differently. It's less like you're paying a debt, more like you belong to yourself. Maybe I'm becoming fluent in my own life, Amara said. Then prepare for a conversation worth having, Rose replied, smiling into the steam. Back home, Amara washed the second mug, which was clean, and placed it beside her own. Not an invitation, she told herself. A welcome should arrive. She opened the window to rain so soft, it felt imaginary. The city drew itself in silver lines. She stood long enough to understand she didn't have to chase the next chapter. She only had to keep the door unlocked, the kettle full, the lights warm. The following weeks built a pattern with breathing room work, laughter, late-night calls with Lila, like a gentle radio show, soup recipes, traded with neighbors. The arts center grew loud in the good ways. The bookstore plan turned into lumber and light. Nora's nods carried quiet pride. On a morning that smelled of wet cedar and possibility, Amara wrapped a scarf, tucked sketches under her arm, and stepped into a sky, trying on blue like a daring coat. A shop window returned her reflection, no longer a woman bracing against the weather, but one in conversation with it. The city promised nothing. It didn't need to. It offered a stage for a voice. She was relearning hands that remembered how to make things, rooms that opened when she pressed her palm to the wall. Turning the corner toward the bookstore, she felt the smallest click in the day's clockwork, the murmur of alignment. Not fate exactly, but readiness, unafraid. She did not look for what might be coming. She let herself be found by the present, and the present, pleased by her good manners, began to glow. Somewhere a train sighed, and a gull stitched its white wing through a slice of sky. Amara tightened her scarf, lifted her chin, and walked on, carrying quiet joy like fire in a lantern, contained, patient, and bright enough to light the doorway she hadn't yet reached. The bookstore renovation took longer than Amara had expected. Wood panels smelled of cedar and polish, her fingertips roughened by sandpaper. Her sketchbook filled with new notes scribbled in margins, light eel, invitation curves, soften fear benches, encourage pause. The project kept her busy enough that days bled into weeks, each stitched together with small progress. But she was beginning to learn that life was always conspiring with surprise. It happened on a Thursday evening after she had stayed too long under the dim lamps of the store repositioning displays, until Jules finally shooed her out with a laugh. Go live your life, the bookseller teased, her hands covered in sawdust. The shelves will wait for you. Outside, the Seattle sky sagged with the weight of an almost rain. Amara clutched her sketch tube under her arm and crossed the street. Her mind distracted her body, moving on habit. That was when it happened, a collision so ordinary, and yet so quietly extraordinary. Her shoulder struck a chest solid and unyielding. The impact jolted the sketch tube from her grip, sending papers spiraling across the wet pavement like startled birds. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she gasped, dropping to her knees to gather them. A low, steady voice answered, "No, that was my fault. Let me help." She glanced up, and the world tilted. The man kneeling across from her was tall, dressed in a tailored navy coat, with the understated elegance of someone who never needed to prove his worth. His hair was dark blonde, streaked with a hint of gold where the streetlight touched it. But his eyes, storm gray deep, unreadable, made her chest tighten. There was sorrow tucked into the corners, a quiet ache that felt startlingly familiar. Their hands reached for the same sketch at once. His fingers brushed hers, warm, steady, unhurried, and Amara froze, as if a current had passed between them. She pulled back, clutching the page, heart unsteady. "You're an artist," he asked, studying the sketches before she could tuck them away. "Designer," she corrected softly, rising to her feet. "Interior design." He stood as well, unfolding himself with calm precision. He was broad-shouldered, but his posture carried no arrogance, only a quiet gravity, like a man used to holding weight. He said, "You must be perfect," handing back the rest of her papers. "Even on the ground your lines look purposeful." Heat touched her cheeks. Compliments had once felt cheap, thrown at her by Michael in half-distracted tones. But here from this stranger, the words carried sincerity. "Thank you," she murmured, tucking the sketches back. "I should go." Something flickered across his expression, a hesitation, as if he wanted to stop her, but did not know how. Instead, he nodded, his voice quiet. "Take care of your art. It looks like it carries more than design. It holds you." She walked away quickly, pulse racing, trying to understand why a single encounter had unsettled her profoundly. The next morning, the world answered her unspoken question. Nora called her into the office. Her boss explained that "We've received a request," sliding a folder across the table. "A major contract, high profile. You'd be the lead if you take it." Amara opened the folder. A corporate tower, sleek and glassy, needs a complete redesign of its executive floor. Her eyes skimmed the client's name and froze. Her breath caught. She saw him again in her mind's eye, storm gray eyes and a steady voice. "Ethan Walker." She whispered the name silently, as if testing it. "You'll meet him this afternoon," Nora continued. "He personally asked for someone who values human warmth in design. I told him that's exactly who you are." Her heart lurched. Fate, she thought, is nothing if not mischievous. The boardroom of Walker Enterprises was everything Amara distrusted in modern design. Sharp edges, cold marble glass walls that intimidated rather than welcomed. Yet when Ethan Walker entered the room, he seemed strangely apart from his empire. He wore a charcoal suit, and his tie loosened slightly, as if even formality was too tight a leash. His gaze found hers, instantly, recognition flashing across his features. Surprise softened into something gentler, something almost private. "Miss Johnson," he said, extending his hand. "We've met before." Her throat tightened. Briefly, she managed shaking his hand. His grip was firm, but not overpowering. A steadiness that unsettled her differently. As the meeting unfolded, she forced herself to focus on her presentation, guiding him through sketches speaking about warmth, natural light, and textures that invited touch. But every time she looked up, his eyes were on her, not scrutinizing, but listening, and truly listening. When the others filed out, satisfied with the preliminary plan, Ethan lingered. His voice lowered, more personal. "You have a gift," he said. "You see what a room is and what it could heal." The word startled her. Heal. No one had ever described her work that way. Before she could respond, tiny footsteps echoed in the hall. A little girl no older than 6 burst into the room with a laugh that echoed like bells. Her curls bounced her dress painted with rainbows. "Daddy!" she squealed, running straight into Ethan's arms. He bent, catching her effortlessly, his face softening into an expression Amara had not thought possible, the gray of his eyes melting into warmth. He kissed the girl's hair. "Emma, you're supposed to be with Grace. She said I could find you," Emma declared proudly, then noticed Amara. Her big hazel eyes lit up. "Who's this?" "This is Miss Johnson," Ethan said gently. She's helping us make our offices beautiful. Emma tilted her head, studying Amara with a solemnity beyond her years. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled widely. "You look like the lady in my drawings," she said. Amara blinked, startled. "Your drawings?" Emma nodded eagerly. "The one I want to be my fairy godmother." "But maybe you can be my friend." Ethan chuckled softly, embarrassment touching his voice. Emma imagines everyone as characters in her stories. Amara crouched, smiling despite herself. "I'd be honored to be your friend." Emma clapped her hands as if she had won a prize. Ethan watched the exchange quietly, something unreadable flickering across his features. That night, Amara lay awake staring at the ceiling of her small apartment. She replayed the day, the weight of his handshake, the way his eyes softened when he looked at his daughter, the strange warmth she felt when Emma's tiny fingers curled trustingly around hers. She should not feel this way. She had promised herself she would not. Love once betrayed her. She was not ready to risk it again. And yet something about Ethan Walker lingered in her chest, unsettling and irresistible, like a chord struck and left vibrating. She turned over, pressing her face into the pillow, whispering into the darkness, "Not again. Please, not again." But her heart, reckless and unrepentant, beat its own answer. Perhaps again. Perhaps exactly again. The contract with Walker Enterprises should have been just another project, a professional engagement, a portfolio booster. Amara reminded herself of this every morning, scribbling mantras on the edges of her sketchbook. This is work. This is not your heart. This is not your life. But nothing about Ethan Walker fit into neat compartments. He was not the kind of client who glanced once at a rendering and dismissed it with a wave. He lingered. He asked questions. He noticed details not only in the drawings, but in her expressions when she spoke. And when he listened, truly listened, she felt a strange, dangerous comfort, as though every word she said mattered. The project began with site visits and extended hours of wandering through the cavernous floors of Walker Enterprises. Together they stood inside the sterile conference rooms, staring at white walls that seemed to repel warmth. Amara sketched quickly, her pencil gliding lines, curving where the space demanded softness. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, once close enough that she caught the faint trace of his cologne. Something woodsy, steady like cedar and smoke. "You don't just see the walls," he murmured. "You know what they long to become." Her pulse stuttered. She tucked the pencil behind her ear to distract herself. Spaces should welcome people, not intimidate them. A building is only alive if people feel safe inside it. He studied her, as though committing the words to memory. "Safe," he repeated quietly, as if the word itself held weight. Their days fell into a rhythm she proposed, textures, colors, and patterns. He countered with practical questions about cost and function. But somehow, between discussions of lighting fixtures and conference acoustics, they discovered fragments of each other. He confessed his love for music, the way late-night jazz records eased him into sleep. She admitted her habit of humming under her breath when sketching. Once he caught her humming Autumn Leaves, and instead of teasing, he softly finished the line, his voice low, rough around the edges, but sincere. The silence afterwards hummed with something unspoken. One evening, Ethan surprised her after a long day of reviewing floor plans. "Do you have a place where you unwind after work?" he asked, rain streaking the glass walls behind them as they stood in the lobby. She hesitated, then answered truthfully, "Sweet Haven. It's a cafe near my apartment. Feels less like the world is spinning too fast." His mouth curved slightly, the rare shadow of a smile. "Then I should see what calms the world for you." And so he came. When she saw them enter together, Rose raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She only placed 2 cups of chamomile on the table, as though she had expected it all along. They sat by the window, the rain's rhythm tapping softly against the glass. Ethan leaned back, his tie loosened, looking less like the untouchable CEO and more like a man learning to exhale. "Your world is quieter than mine," he admitted, watching her fingers trace the rim of her cup. "I envy that." Amara studied him. Beneath his polished exterior, she saw exhaustion, the lines carved by responsibility, the shadows of grief still lurking in his eyes. She remembered Emma's laughter, the way it lit him up briefly, as if she were the only anchor keeping him steady. "You don't need to envy," she said softly. "You need a place that lets you be human." The words seemed to strike him, and for a moment his gaze dropped to his cup as though the tea might hold an answer. Later that week, as they reviewed material samples in his office, Amara noticed a framed photograph on his desk. A woman with golden hair, smiling softly at the camera. Emma perched on her hip as a toddler. His late wife. Amara's chest tightened. She had not asked before or dared, but now the image rooted itself in her. The woman's presence lingered in the room, in Ethan's guarded silences, in how his eyes sometimes grew distant when laughter filled the air. He caught her glance. For a long second he said nothing. Then quietly her name was Clara. Amara froze, not sure whether to apologize. But Ethan continued, his voice low. She was everything steady. And when she was gone, I thought the ground might never return beneath my feet. Amara's throat ached. She wanted to tell him she understood the kind of loss that rewrites you. But her own scars came from betrayal, not death, and she could not pretend they were the same. Instead, she offered the only truth she had. "Sometimes the ground doesn't return," she whispered. "You learn to build new foundations." His eyes lifted to hers. She thought she saw relief for the briefest moment, like a man carrying too heavy a stone, and someone had offered to bear even a fraction of it. Yet the closer they drifted, the more Amara recoiled inside. Nights found her staring at the ceiling, repeating the same warning. Don't fall. Don't forget. Michael's betrayal was still carved too sharply into her heart. The memory of walking in on him, his hands on another woman, returned in flashes, cruel reminders of what trust could cost. So when Ethan's hand brushed hers as he passed her a folder, she flinched. He noticed. His brows knit, but he didn't press. Instead, he gave her space. He walked her to her car, but never lingered too long. He offered warmth, but never demanded. His patience was almost more dangerous than pursuit. It made her want to lean in to believe. And slowly, dangerously, she began to. It was Emma who tipped the balance. One Friday, Amara visited the Walker residence to review the design inspirations Ethan kept at home. The house, sprawling yet tasteful, smelled faintly of vanilla and cedar. Emma bounded down the stairs, a drawing in hand. "Miss Amara," she exclaimed, waving the paper. "Look, it's you." The crayon sketch showed a stick figure with curly hair standing between a taller man and a more petite girl. Above them, a rainbow arched wide. Ethan chuckled, ruffling his daughter's hair. "You've promoted Miss Johnson to family already." Emma beamed. "She belongs." "Don't you see?" Amara's chest squeezed. She crouched, taking the paper carefully. "That's beautiful, Emma. Can I keep it?" "Yes." "Because then you'll remember us," the little girl declared with absolute certainty. Ethan's gaze met hers over Emma's head. Something unspoken passed between them. Fear, longing, possibility, all tangled in a silence too fragile to break. Seattle had begun to teach Amara the rhythm of gentleness. Days no longer broke her apart. They folded into one another with quiet steadiness, meetings at Walker Enterprises late nights, refining sketches afternoons at Sweet Haven, where Rose would refill her teacup before it ever ran dry. And of course, moments with Ethan and Emma that she had not meant to treasure, but found herself replaying in the stillness of the night. For weeks, she felt almost safe in the fragile cocoon of her new life, until the past relentlessly and uninvited decided to knock on her door. It was a heavy Tuesday with drizzle, when Seattle seemed to paint itself in watercolor grays. Amara had just left the arts center after dropping off donation sketches when she heard it. Her name carried low and deliberate through the mist. Amara. The syllables cut sharper than the rain. She froze. Turning slowly, she saw him. Michael Carter. He hadn't changed much, or perhaps he had, and it was her vision of him that had shifted. He still had that clean-cut jawline, the tailored coat, the easy posture of a man who believed the world bent for him. But now, looking at him through eyes that had seen betrayal up close, she realized how much of his charm had always been a mask. For a moment, the past surged back, the taste of champagne on anniversaries, the warmth of his arms slung over her shoulders, the quiet lies she had once mistaken for comfort. Her stomach twisted. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Michael smiled as if her question were an inside joke. "Business. Seattle's growing and so am I. Imagine my surprise when I learned you're here too." Amara's grip tightened around her umbrella. Surprise or inconvenience? He chuckled. Neither. Relief. It means fate isn't finished with us. Her chest burned. She thought that fate had finished with us the night I found you with someone else. But she didn't say it. Not yet. Michael insisted on buying her a coffee to catch up. Against her better judgment, she allowed it, partly because confrontation in the open daylight felt safer than silence, partly because part of her wanted to face him to prove he no longer held power over her. They sat by the window of a crowded cafe. Rain traced silver veins on the glass, the city blurring beyond. Michael stirred his drink lazily, his eyes never leaving her. "You look different, stronger." "Seattle agrees with you. I didn't ask for your opinion." He smirked, leaning back. "There's the fire I missed." Her patience thinned. "What do you want, Michael?" His voice dropped softer, coaxing. "To try again. To fix what I broke. You and we had something real, Amara. Don't tell me you've forgotten." She laughed bitterly. "Forgotten? No. Forgiven? Never." But Michael leaned forward, his tone sharpening with desperation beneath the polish. "Look at me. You loved me. You don't just erase that." Her heart stung, not because his words were valid, but because they once had been. She had loved him with everything she had, and he had thrown it away. "I did love you," she admitted, her voice trembling with both strength and grief. "But the woman who loved you doesn't exist anymore. You killed her the moment you chose betrayal over honesty." For the first time, Michael faltered. His smile cracked, revealing something darker beneath. "You think that man, whatever he is, will love you more than I did. You think he'll stay. Men don't change, Amara. They leave one way or another." Her pulse quickened. "Ethan." He didn't say his name, but she knew. She stood gathering her things. "Goodbye, Michael." Over the following days, Amara began to notice things. A shadow lingered across the street from her apartment. A figure standing just far enough outside Sweet Haven to avoid suspicion. A black car idling near Walker Enterprises longer than necessary. Michael wasn't gone. He was circling, waiting his presence like a ghost that refused to rest. One evening, as she left Ethan's office after a late design session, she spotted him leaning casually against a lamppost. Their eyes met. He lifted his hand in a mock salute, as though he had every right to linger in her world. Fear fluttered in her chest, but anger followed quickly after. She had run from him once. She would not do it again. Still, she double-checked her locks that night, her mind restless with unease. Ethan noticed the change in her. They were reviewing samples in the Walker residence study when he asked if something was weighing on you. "What is it?" Amara hesitated. Confiding in him meant dragging her past into this fragile present, but the truth pressed against her lips. "It's Michael," she admitted finally. "He's here in Seattle." Ethan's jaw tightened, the air around him cooling. "The man who hurt you." It wasn't a question. She nodded. "He's been watching, following maybe. I don't know what he wants, but he says he wants me back." Silence stretched heavy with implication. Then Ethan set down the sample board and met her gaze with steel. "He won't touch you," he said quietly. "Not while I'm here." The words shouldn't have made her heart race. They should have scared her, reminded her that relying on anyone was dangerous. But at that moment, Ethan's gray eyes were burning with certainty, and she felt a flicker of safety she hadn't known she craved. Later that evening, Emma dragged a coloring book into the room. She climbed onto Amara's lap as though it were the most natural place in the world. "Miss Amara, can you help me color the princess?" she asked, holding a crayon. Amara smiled, tension momentarily easing. "Of course. Which color should her dress be?" Blue, Emma decided firmly. "Like the sky when it's happy." As Amara shaded the dress, Emma leaned against her shoulder and whispered, "Daddy smiles more when you're here." Amara's chest ached, caught between tenderness and fear. Michael was outside somewhere, circling, waiting. And here, inside this warm house, a little girl believed in her presence enough to paint it into her world. She realized then, Michael was the past clawing at what was gone. Ethan and Emma were the possibility of a future if only she dared to reach for it. The evening of the Walker family gathering arrived, with the glow of lanterns strung across the expansive lawn. The house stood like a warm beacon against Seattle's soft dusk, its windows lit, laughter drifting out into the air. Amara paused at the gate, clutching her purse strap, her heart caught in a storm of hesitation. She had told herself she was coming merely as a friend, a guest, nothing more. But deep down she knew the truth. She was walking into a place where lines blurred, where the fragile walls around her heart could crumble. Lila's voice had echoed in her mind as she dressed earlier that evening. "Stop measuring your scars. Let yourself feel, even if it terrifies you." And yet, as Amara climbed the steps and rang the doorbell, her palms were damp with nerves. The door opened, and Emma flung herself into Amara's arms with the unrestrained joy only children knew. "You came," the little girl cried, pressing her cheek to Amara's. "I told Daddy you would." Amara's heart softened instantly. "Of course I did. How could I miss seeing you?" Ethan appeared behind his daughter, dressed in a navy suit without a tie, the top button of his shirt undone. Seeing him stole her breath in a way she wasn't ready to admit. "Welcome," he said, his voice lower than usual, carrying warmth that seemed meant for her alone. "We're glad you're here." Inside the house buzzed with life. Relatives and close friends filled the rooms with conversation, clinking glasses, and bursts of laughter. Amara felt unease at the unfamiliar faces, but Ethan stayed close enough that his presence steadied her. He introduced her simply as a friend and designer, yet his gaze lingered on her with a softness that betrayed more. She caught the curious glances of a few relatives, the way their eyes shifted between her and Ethan, as though piecing together a puzzle. Dinner was a long table draped in ivory linen candles flickering between platters of roasted vegetables and fragrant meats. Amara sat beside Emma, who chattered eagerly about school projects and fairy tales. At one point, as Amara helped cut Emma's food, the child declared suddenly, "When Miss Amara lives with us, I'll share my toys with her." A hush fell around the table. Amara froze, knife poised midair. Her eyes darted instinctively to Ethan. He looked momentarily startled, then composed himself with a small, almost rueful smile. "Emma," he said gently, "Miss Amara has her own home." Emma shook her head with certainty. Not forever. She's supposed to be here. A ripple of laughter broke the tension, but Amara's face burned. She felt exposed, as if a secret she hadn't even confessed to herself had been spoken aloud. Later, when dessert was served, she caught Ethan's gaze across the table. His expression was unreadable, yet his eyes held a question she wasn't ready to answer. When the crowd grew too loud, Amara slipped into the garden. The air was cooler, fragrant with late-blooming roses. She leaned against the railing, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You disappeared." The voice behind her made her jump. Ethan stood a few steps away, his hands tucked into his pockets, his expression softer in the moonlight. "I needed air," she admitted. "Emma has a way of saying things." He chuckled. "She has no filter, but she sees things the rest of us hesitate to name." Amara looked down at her hands. "She shouldn't see me that way. I don't belong in her life like that." Ethan stepped closer, not too close, but enough that she felt the heat of his presence. Belonging isn't about roles or titles. It could be about how someone makes us feel. Her breath caught. She wanted to ask him what she made him feel, but fear pressed the words back down her throat. Instead, she whispered, "You don't know all of me. The parts that are broken." "I don't need you to be unbroken," he said quietly. "I need you to be real." Her eyes stung. She turned away quickly, but he reached out hesitantly and touched her hand where it rested on the railing. The contact was barely there, but it sent warmth rushing through her veins. "Amara." He murmured her name, sounding different on his lips. "I don't want to push, but I can't pretend I don't." The sound of approaching footsteps cut him off. Relatives spilled into the garden, laughing loudly, and the moment fractured. Amara slipped her hand from his and retreated inside before he could finish. When the last guest left, Amara offered to help tidy. Ethan insisted it wasn't necessary, but she collected empty glasses anyway, grateful for something to occupy her hands. As she passed through the living room, she caught sight of the piano tucked in the corner. She hesitated, then sat down, letting her fingers trace the keys. Music had been a secret refuge for her, something she rarely shared. She pressed a few tentative notes, soft, uncertain. Ethan appeared in the doorway, watching. "I didn't know you played," he said. "Not well," she replied, embarrassed. But he stepped closer, his voice warm. "Play anyway." So she did. A simple melody, halting at first, then smoothing as her hands remembered. The song filled the room, fragile but alive. When she glanced up, Ethan's gaze was fixed on her with such intensity that it made her heart stumble. When the last note faded, silence held them. Then Ethan spoke, voice low. "You carry music the way you have light, carefully, as though you're afraid someone will break it. But it's stronger than you think." Her chest ached. She wanted to believe him and step into the warmth of his words. But the fear of betrayal lingered like a shadow at the edge of every thought. "I should go," she said suddenly, standing too quickly. "Amara." His voice followed her, but she was already reaching for her coat, already fleeing before the ground gave way beneath her. Seattle had always worn its storms gracefully. Rain slipped down the glass towers like silver ribbons. Thunder spoke only in low murmurs. But the storm gathering around Amara was different, louder, harsher, and impossible to escape. It began with whispers. She first noticed them when she entered Sweet Haven one afternoon. Two women at a corner table looked up from their phones as she passed, their gazes sharpening lips, moving in conspiratorial murmurs. Rose caught it too. Her brow furrowed as she slid Amara's tea across the counter. "They've started," Rose muttered quietly. started what Amara asked, though her pulse already quickened. Rose tilted her chin toward the women. The city loves a story, especially one that can twist. Later that evening, Amara saw it for herself. Her phone buzzed with a link from Lila, accompanied by an outraged message. "Don't you dare look at the comments!" The article headline glared at her. From designer to gold digger, inside the rumored romance between CEO Ethan Walker and his new muse. Her breath caught. The article painted her as an opportunist, a woman scheming her way into Ethan's life for wealth and power. They dissected her career, questioned her motives, even hinted she had a pattern of chasing men with influence. Her relationship with Michael was spun into proof evidence that she had a taste for ambition, not love. Amara's hands trembled as she scrolled. Michael's name was there, quoted liberally. She always wanted more. I gave her everything, but she wanted the world. Looks like she found it in Ethan Walker. The room swayed. She set the phone down as if it were burning. The next day at Walker Enterprises, Ethan was quieter than usual. He reviewed her designs with incredible precision. His comments clipped his gaze, avoiding hers. Amara tried to focus on the floor plans, but her chest tightened each minute. Finally, she broke the silence. "You've seen it, haven't you?" He set down the sample board, his jaw taut. "I have." And she pressed though she feared the answer. He exhaled slowly, as though measuring each word. "I don't know what to think, Amara. You've become important to Emma, to me. But these rumors, this narrative complicate everything." The words cut deeper than Michael's betrayal ever had. She had expected Ethan to fight for the truth, to dismiss the noise. Instead, doubt clouded his eyes. "Would I use you?" Her voice cracked, the old wound tearing open. "After everything. After what I've been through, Amara." He began, his tone softer now, but the hesitation was enough. She backed away, shaking her head. "No, don't. If you can even question me, then Michael was right. Maybe men don't change at all." The look on Ethan's face hurt. Conflicted restraint seared into her as she fled the office. That evening, rain hammered the city with unusual force. Amara sat by her apartment window, watching the streets blur into liquid light. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, weary eyes, lips pressed tight against the scream building in her chest. She thought of Emma's innocent trust, Ethan's steady voice in the garden, and how he looked at her while she played the piano. For a fleeting time, she had believed this could be different, that love could bloom without deceit. But the article's words gnawed at her. Opportunist, gold digger. She had rebuilt her life from ashes, only to be painted as a scavenger of others' success. And worst of all, Ethan's hesitation proved how easily doubt could shatter everything she had begun to trust. Tears pricked her eyes. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, whispering into the storm. Why wasn't I enough to believe in? The next day, Amara dragged herself to Sweet Haven. Rose looked at her and pulled her into the back room away from prying eyes. "They're lies," Rose said firmly, her voice cutting through Amara's silence. "And lies only live if you water them with attention." Amara's laugh was hollow. But Ethan, he believed them, or at least, he doubted. Rose placed both hands on Amara's shoulders, her silver hair catching the light. "Listen to me. The measure of a man is not in whether he stumbles, but in whether he rises to defend truth. If Ethan is worth your heart, he'll fight back for it. But you, child, cannot spend your soul proving yourself to those who don't deserve the proof." Amara closed her eyes. Rose's words were balm, but they did not erase the ache. That evening, Amara's phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "See, he doesn't trust you either. You'll always belong to me." Her stomach twisted. She knew it was Michael taunting her, feeding on the chaos he had created. For the first time in months, she felt the old fear return. The fear of being trapped in a cycle where men defined her worth, where betrayal was inevitable, where her heart was nothing more than a pawn. She threw the phone onto the couch and buried her face in her hands. At Walker Enterprises, the distance between her and Ethan widened the following week. Their conversations were polite, professional, but stripped of warmth. The easy rhythm they had found was gone, replaced by silences that stretched like cracks in the foundation of a house. Emma noticed. One afternoon, as Amara helped her color at the office daycare, the child whispered, "Why are you sad? Did Daddy make you unhappy?" Amara forced a smile, her throat tight. "It's not your fault, sweetheart." Emma frowned. "I don't like it when he forgets to smile. He only smiles when you're here." Amara's heart broke. She wanted to tell Emma that love was complicated, that adults sometimes forgot the simplicity children understood instinctively. But how could she explain betrayal and doubt to a 6-year-old? Instead, she kissed Emma's forehead and whispered, "I hope he remembers how to smile again." The days after the scandal felt like walking through fog. Amara moved carefully, mechanically drafting designs, attending meetings, keeping her head low as whispers followed her like shadows. She had learned painfully to let gossip pass without feeding it, but this time it was different. This time, the person whose belief mattered most had faltered. Ethan's silence haunted her. The trust she had begun to let herself feel for him, hard-won, tentative, fragile, had cracked under the weight of doubt. And pride held her back while she longed to explain and shake him, until he saw the truth in her eyes. She would not beg to be seen clearly. Not again. Yet somewhere deep inside, she still wanted him to fight for her. Michael, however, thrived in the chaos. He lingered at the edges of her days, always near enough to unsettle her, never close enough to confront directly. She saw him once outside her apartment, leaning against his car with a grin that promised trouble. Another time, she spotted his reflection in the cafe window before he vanished into the crowd. His presence was like poison in her bloodstream, subtle, insidious, impossible to ignore. Then came the second article. This time the headline screamed, "Exclusive former lover speaks out. Amara Johnson's pattern of manipulation." The quotes inside were unmistakably Michael's. He painted himself as the victim of her supposed ambition, claiming she had drained him emotionally, only to abandon him for a wealthier man. He spoke of her with calculated sorrow, his lies dressed in the language of heartbreak. Amara's chest constricted as she read. She wanted to rage, scream, deny. But she also knew how the world worked. People preferred tragedy over truth, spectacle over sincerity. Still, a quiet ember of anger began to glow within her. She was tired of being defined by the mouths of men who sought to diminish her. The turning point came unexpectedly. Ethan sat in his office late one evening, his desk littered with contracts he couldn't focus on. The article lay open on his screen, Michael's words taunting him. For days he had tried to silence the gnawing doubt, to convince himself that keeping distance from Amara was the safest choice for Emma, for himself, for the fragile stability he clung to. But then he noticed something, a slip in Michael's narrative. Michael claimed that Amara had chased him across states, clinging to him even when he tried to leave. Yet Ethan remembered Amara's eyes when she first told him about Michael's steady, pained, but never desperate. He recalled her courage in confessing that she had walked away, that she had chosen to start anew, rather than remain with someone who had betrayed her. The timelines didn't align, the details clashed. And for the first time, Ethan saw Michael's words for what they were: manipulation. Anger surged in his chest, hot and unrelenting. How could he have doubted her? How could he, who had seen the honesty in her every gesture, have allowed the poison of another man's lies to cloud his vision. Ethan stood, grabbed his coat, and made a decision. Michael was not difficult to find. He was holding court at a high-end bar downtown, surrounded by acquaintances who thrived on gossip as much as he did. Ethan approached his presence, commanding immediate silence. Conversations faltered, eyes shifted. Michael's smile wavered only momentarily before he replaced it with smugness. Michael drawled. He raised his glass as if it weren't Seattle's most eligible widower. "Come to toast our mutual acquaintance." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Enough games. Leave Amara out of your mouth." Michael smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Touchy, aren't we? You should thank me. I'm doing you a favor, revealing her true colors before she drains you." Ethan said, "She doesn't have to drain me." His voice sharp. "She gives without asking for anything in return, which is more than I can say for you." The bar fell silent, tension vibrating in the air. Michael leaned forward, his smile turning venomous. "You think you're different? You're not. She'll leave you too. That's what she does." "No," Ethan replied firmly. "That's what you did. And now you can't stand the sight of her moving on. You want her miserable so you don't have to face the truth that you destroyed something beautiful, and she survived without you." Michael's expression cracked, fury flashing across his features. But Ethan didn't wait for a retort. He turned on his heel and left his heart pounding. His certainty solidified. Amara was not the woman Michael painted her to be. She was stronger, braver, more luminous than any headline could capture. And he had nearly lost her because he hadn't trusted what he already knew. The very next day, Ethan called a press conference. The board had advised against it. Too personal. They warned too risky. But Ethan ignored them. He stood before the cameras, his suit impeccable, his voice steady, but edged with fire. "There have been rumors regarding Amara Johnson." He began, the microphones catching every syllable. "Rumors that paint her as manipulative, opportunistic, unworthy. I'm here to tell you those rumors are lies." Reporters leaned forward, eager. Ethan continued, his tone unwavering. "Amara Johnson is a woman of integrity, talent, and strength. She has faced betrayal and cruelty, yet never once compromised her character. I let myself believe voices that did not deserve to be heard. And for that, I owe her my apology and my defense. Anyone who questions her worth will have to answer to me." The room erupted with questions, flashes of cameras. But Ethan's words had already cut through the noise. The narrative shifted in real time, the whispers turning into gasps of admiration. Amara hadn't planned to watch. She had sworn off news outlets after the articles, but Rose insisted, pushing the remote into her hand. "Just watch," Rose said firmly. And so she did. She sat frozen on the cafe sofa as Ethan's face filled the screen, his voice ringing with conviction. Each word struck her like a stone thrown into still water, rippling through the walls she had built. He wasn't just defending her. He was reclaiming her truth in front of the world. By the time the broadcast ended, tears blurred her vision. She set the remote down with trembling fingers. "He fought," Rose murmured, her own eyes glistening. "The question is, will you let him back into your heart?" Amara couldn't answer. Not yet. But hope stirred again for the first time in weeks, fragile but alive. The storm had passed. Not completely. Its traces still lingered like damp footprints on the floor of Amara's life, but the worst of it had broken. Truth had been spoken aloud in a way that even the hungriest rumor could not devour. And Ethan had stood at the center of it all, steady and unyielding, declaring her worth to the world. For days after his public apology, Amara walked through Seattle with a strange mixture of relief and fear. Relief, because the narrative had shifted. Strangers no longer looked at her suspiciously, but with curiosity, even admiration. Fear, because her heart, long accustomed to guarding itself, now faced the terrifying possibility of trusting again. She had not yet given Ethan an answer. But her silence was not rejection. It was the space she needed to measure the depth of her feelings. One evening, as twilight bled into the city and the sky turned lavender, a knock came at her door. Amara opened it to find Emma holding a bunch of daisies, almost too large for her small arms. Behind her, Ethan waited, his expression uncertain but hopeful. "Daddy says flowers can say sorry," Emma announced brightly. "So we brought you a whole bouquet of sorries." Amara laughed, despite the tightness in her throat. She crouched, taking the flowers gently. "Thank you, sweetheart. They're beautiful." Emma beamed, then scampered past her into the apartment, already at home. Ethan lingered at the threshold, his gray eyes searching hers. "May I come in?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Inside, Emma settled onto the couch with crayons and paper, humming to herself. The quiet gave Ethan and Amara the space they needed. "I didn't trust you," he said without preamble. His voice low, steady but threaded with regret. "When you needed me to see you clearly, I let doubt cloud my vision. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I need you to know I was wrong." Amara's chest ached. She set the daisies in a vase, letting the petals brush her fingertips before answering. "You hurt me," she admitted softly. "Not because you doubted, but because you were supposed to be different. And for a moment, I thought you weren't." He stepped closer. "I want to be different. For you, for Emma, for myself." Her gaze lifted to his, caught in the rawness of his expression. Slowly, carefully, the walls around her heart began to tremble. The moment stretched taut with unspoken words. Then, Ethan reached out, not pulling her close, just brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, reverent. Amara's breath caught. For weeks, she had fought against this gravity, denying the pull that kept drawing her toward him. But now, with his eyes locked on hers, the resistance broke. She rose onto her toes and their lips met. The kiss was not frantic, but aching, the slow burn of two people holding back for far too long. His hands framed her face, steadying her as if she were something precious. She melted into him, her fingers curling against the fabric of his shirt, feeling the solid thrum of his heartbeat. When they finally parted, breathless, Ethan whispered, "I never want to let you go again." Amara rested her forehead against his. "Then don't." The days that followed were different. Not perfect. There were still moments of hesitation, shadows of old fears, but Amara allowed herself to step fully into the possibility of love for the first time. Ethan was patient. He didn't demand grand declarations. Instead, he wove himself gently into her routines. Morning coffees were left on her desk. Quiet walks after work where silence felt as intimate as words. Evenings were spent at Sweet Haven, where Rose, with knowing eyes, always placed their cups aside without asking. Emma adored her presence, drawing endless pictures of the three of them. Stick figures holding hands beneath rainbows, crayon-colored houses with open doors. Each drawing was like a seed of the future planted in the fertile soil of Amara's healing heart. Her career, too, blossomed. The art center's success brought recognition. Her bookstore design became a feature in a regional magazine. For the first time, she was not simply surviving. She was thriving, her talent finally given the light it deserved. And Michael. He lingered still, but his power had waned. His words no longer carried weight after Ethan's defense. His attempts to reach her met only silence. Once she saw him across the street, watching her with eyes that burned with regret. But where fear had once lived in her chest, now there was only pity. She no longer belonged to that past. And perhaps that was the cruelest punishment of all, that Michael could see her radiant, moving forward, untouched by the ruin he had tried to leave her in. Ethan invited her and Lila to an evening gathering at his home. The house glowed with firelight and soft music, the air warm with laughter. Later, when most guests had gone, Amara stood by the fireplace, the heat brushing her skin. Ethan joined her, offering a glass of wine. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" he asked, his tone cautious. She met his gaze all the time. "But I'm learning not to fear it." His eyes softened. "I want to build something with you. Not just spaces or designs. A life. A home. Could we?" Her heart thudded, the weight of the moment pressing into her. For a long time she had feared promises. But now, looking at Ethan, his steadiness, patience, and undeniable love, she felt courage stir within her. She reached for his hand. "Yes," she whispered. "We can."